You're listening to We're All Gonna Die Anyway with Jess Weiner. Don't worry. This is a joyful podcast about life, death, and everything in between. Today's guests are a real power couple united in their purpose. I always love meeting and working with influential and intentional people. And our guests today, I think, are not only going to give you relationship goals, but are really modeling for me what it looks like to be in partnership with your partner on a shared mission. And when I think about what living the good life feels like for me, and I get to experience that with my husband, Felipe, we work very actively on being aligned as a couple with a purpose. Outside of loving ourselves and loving each other, how do we want to impact the world? And today's guests are doing that. And of course, in true fashion, I met them for the first time today during this interview, and we immediately fell fast in love. And they are like my sisters and brothers from other mothers. And I'm so excited for you to meet Derek and Sophia Luke. Now, you probably have seen Derek Luke's work before. He's an actor. He's been in Antwone Fisher, Friday Night Lights, Biker Boys. Some of my favorite TV shows that he's been on have been Empire, The Americans, 13 Reasons Why, and The Purge. His wife, Sophia, is also an actress, and she took her experiences in the industry as a woman of color and has really turned it into a passionate pursuit around representation in this industry. Obviously, something I can deeply get behind. But beyond that, Derek and Sophia are aligned in a mission to really give back to their community. And they do that in a number of different ways as they live and design their good life. They have a lot of speaking engagements and workshops in their communities where they help families bond together and create memorable experiences through different love and educational programs. They work with underserved and incarcerated youth, and they help to champion the Science Genius Initiative, which introduces young people to the beauty and the magic of science through the power of hip hop. So they are up to so many incredible things, in addition to being sort of a Hollywood power duo. When I met them on this interview, and we fell kind of fast into a deep discussion about purpose, and especially against the backdrop of Hollywood, where this is, the stereotype tends to be true in this community that it can be very surface focused if the surface is where you're focusing on. And there are lots of pockets of envy and ego here, and there's lots of competition. But when you go a layer deeper to that, to the artists who work in this community, and you think about everybody here who comes here with a dream to live the good life and to create the work on the screen that they want to see out in the world, that's when you really tap into the power. And so when Derek and Sophia and I sat down for this interview via Zoom, that's the level of which this conversation got to. It was a lot about how we use our art and our activism and our philanthropy for a purpose, and how they, as a married couple, really weather the journey together in discovering who they are as individuals, who they are together, and what kind of good life they want to make. So they were a perfect guest for this program. I'm really excited. If you know them from their work, I'm excited for you to get to know them now for the people that they're being in the world. So without further ado, let's dig in with Derek and Sophia Luke. It's always, I think, exceptionally divine, too, to speak to people who are strangers but don't feel like that, right? So we've never met each other before, but in just a short time we've been talking, I feel really connected to your spirit, to your generosity, of course, by doing this interview together. And to, I think, what I'm noticing in some of your stories or life stories that I'm reading about, this through line of intentionality. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious to hear. So one of the places I like to start is around like your birth and your birth stories, because, we all know we're going to be born. Well, we don't know we're going to be born, but we are born and we all die. And we know those things to be true for everybody. But what we make up in the middle kind of is the richness of our lives. And so I'm curious, Sophia, do you know about your birth story and what that was like?
Do you know what? I just, that's so awesome that you asked that question, Jess, because my son today said, "Mommy, tell me about when you were a little girl." And I was like, your mouth right now. I was like,
how old is your son?
4.5. He's delicious, by the way.
Oh my God, I bet.
And I was like, I don't remember the last time somebody asked about that like he did. So perfect question. The first thing that comes to my heart right now is that we had a pretty rough upbringing. So my mom got pregnant when she was, I believe, 14. Or no,
Wow.
excuse me, 15. She had her first child at 16 and had four by the age of 20.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So my dad, so you have children
Yeah.
raising children,
Yeah.
and they are in a way better space now than they were then. They did the
Sure.
very best that they
Oh
could.
my,
Could you even imagine?
no.
I
What
have
order
my
were you
son,
in those four? Are you the
um,
oldest?
the third.
Oh, you're the
We have
third. Okay.
younger. I have two older brother, older
And one
sister,
younger.
myself, and a little brother who's now in heaven.
Mm.
But my mom told me what happened about when I was born. My dad wasn't there,
Okay.
but she said she specifically remembers that when I came out, she said it was a normal like time in the day. There was no, you know, no clouds, no anything. She said, I heard thunder and it kept thundering. And then she said, your grandma helped name you. They were going to name me Dulce Corazon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was like,
Sweetheart.
but yes, exactly. And I was like, okay, I could live with that name. But you know, they ended up naming me Sophia, and then my middle name, which is Adela,
Oh,
which
wow.
means,
Beautiful.
yeah, woman revolutionary. There was Adelitas in the
Mhm.
Latin race, and then of course my dad's last name, which was Hernandez. So the first thing that came to my heart was when I was born in that hospital, that my mom had told me the incidents that took place, and she's like, I just knew then that something significant was going to happen in your life. You were
Wow.
going to be significant in this world. And
Hmm.
then from then it was just total chaos until I turned right in my right mind, like, you know, years after high school. So
Yeah.
my little story that I remember.
What a powerful image to think about thunder, like like hearkening as you're getting born into this world.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And to be such a young mom. So like by that time, what was she, 19 while she was having you?
Probably 19. Yeah,
Because you're
19.
having a kid almost like every year at that point.
Yeah, 15, 16, 17, 18,
Wow.
19. She had a miscarriage 1 year right after me.
Oh,
So
wow.
you're probably about right, like 18, 19. Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh, that's that's prophetic. That's also why I like to ask about people's birth stories if they can have them. Not that they all have to be this way, but it is interesting to see the themes as they start, even when we're brought into this,
Yeah.
into this world.
Yeah.
Derek, what about you? What was your birth story like?
Oh my God. Shoot, you're making me think about whether it was raining or I think the birth story for me starts really with images. And my, one image was that I was born with red hair.
Cute.
I believe that I was born at what time my mom, I think she said 7:14 a.m. on Wednesday. And I was like, man, Mom, you remember that? She said, you never forget having a baby. And I was like, yeah, that's true. That would be right. And then I remember times with my mom where faith was in the forefront, or I should say, faith was non-optional, and not having our dad around all the time. That finding out how to become the maintenance man or the mechanic was sort of a act of discovery.
Of
And
course.
so many times, because we grew up in a very spiritual household, my mom would challenge us with putting our faith to action. And so, for instance, I remember two moments that really began to sort of define me. One, when my mom would say we were walking somewhere, and someone said, "Hey, like, hey, Sonny," or something like that, and something, and my mom said, "You said my name's not Sonny, my name is Derek." And then there was another time where my brother and we were just coming from, let's say, the grocery store, and my grandmother came all the way a few cities over just to take us. And it was pretty late at night, and my grandmother asked my mom, Marjorie, she was like, Marjorie, I need one of the boys to come back with me. And she said, okay, I'm going to flip a coin. And she said, at first we were just, getting so excited. And then all of a sudden she says, I got quiet. And it's interesting because there was a lot of moments in my life where I find myself being quiet or observing. But this particular moment, she says to me, after she flips the coin, she said, Derek, I had noticed you got pretty quiet, and I don't remember. And she said, I asked you, and you said to me, I got quiet because I saw myself going. And she just looked at me, and she looked at the quarter, and sure enough,
it was your turn.
it was my turn. And I didn't really want to go to my grandmother's house, but it was just the fact that my brother was excited that I was just like, yeah, okay. And so, like, I remember those stories, and I remember my mom telling me that out of 3 boys, I was the only one that could sleep from 7 to 7, and she would have to check up on me in the middle of the night to make sure I was breathing, because my other brothers were totally, opposite. So it's those things that sort of connect with you and confirm with you.
Yeah. And those are the stories, if we have the benefit of having parents who can remind us or tell us of our childhood stories. I know some people can't, but for those of us who can, it's like pieces of a puzzle, right? You kind of see little parts of yourself. When you look back, Derek, on your childhood, if you could describe it in 3 words off the top of your head, what would you pick?
Wow. Purpose, intention, and faith.
Yeah. Talk to me about the purpose piece. Where does the purpose come in?
Purpose came in because I believe it was during high school or after high school or leading up to graduation. Or it was coming to California. My mom gave me a book, and by the way, outside of like scripture, she would have us remember she'd never given me a book ever, and she gave me a book, and this was about finding and fulfilling your potential.
Wow.
And or birthing your purpose. And so I think I was intrigued. I think purpose is when I begin to learn. And the other years of my life, I felt like I was just drifting.
Yep.
Or I was on autopilot, but no one had ever asked me, as like the young lady said to you, nobody asked, find out who she was. And it's interesting because that's the rules to acting, the 5 W's, the what, the why, but I didn't know it also applies to your individual life.
Yeah.
And so when I went after purpose, I went after meaning, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And then everything else that would happen was a necessary transaction to my destination, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Were you aware of that in high school at that age? Do you think all of that became clear then, or has this been coming clear over the course of your life?
It's been coming I believe it came clear just during my life. I had a talented family, meaning that uh, many many musicians in my family, and I would always ask, why didn't they do anything with it? And, and after I asked that, then I find out that my dad was an actor and turned like pastor. And then, I think it bothered me that we sort of had joy, but we didn't have anything else. And I just thought, the exchange rate for joy was very low on my, especially
Yeah.
dealing
When
with the
you're a
culture.
kid too. Yeah.
Yeah, dealing with the culture, it was just like, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, that's I want to dig into where the purpose and meaning intersect now in your life together. I know you got a head start on these on thinking, Sophia, but what would you say is your childhood in 3 words?
I would say pain,
Hmm.
uh, adventure, discovery.
Wow. All right, talk to me about the pain part.
The pain was uh, my siblings being hungry.
Hmm. Yeah.
My parents not being together.
Yeah.
Um, not feeling like you fit in. Just
Yeah.
you're, uh, yeah, like that pain of just all of the, with when you're growing up with parents who are children themselves,
Right. Right.
there's just so much chaos, and they are. Yeah, I don't even know how they did it. Like, I
Yeah.
really just thank God that I'm alive and sane and focused.
Yeah.
Before I really just, that pain, I didn't know the word purpose. I'd never heard the word purpose. And
Mm.
I thought I was a punching bag or somebody's jewelry on their wrist,
Mhm.
that success was for others, and that
Mhm.
it wasn't in here in me,
Yeah.
until I went on that discovery of
Mhm.
finding out, wait a second, I have a voice and there's something that I'm supposed to do. And I believe that those flickers in my heart are things that I am to do. And
Yeah.
yes, when you said earlier about how, you know, you doing the work that you do is, stems from what you don't want to happen again,
Yeah.
or being able to help somebody that perhaps nobody was there to help you. And
Right.
there's so many different levels of pain that I have gone through, that there's so many different areas that I want to be able to help young
Mhm.
people, from whether it be poverty, abuse, neglect. I
Mhm.
mean, the list literally goes on. So that would be it.
Did you have language for pain? Like, did you recognize it as pain or did you believe it to be who you were? Because I had that experience. The things that happened to me, I believed were me. And
Mhm.
it took me some education, right, to separate those. But I'm curious, when you were a little girl, did you know you were in pain or did you think something else? Like, was that available to you, that word?
I knew I was in pain,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't think it was weird, because I felt like I was under somebody's heel,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't have a right to get up and say, take your foot off of me now.
Yeah.
And so, and what was the other part of that question?
Just about whether you thought it was you. You know, sometimes when we have that much trauma as a kid, it's easy for us to identify like, well, there must be something wrong with me to
Mhm.
be feeling this, right? Because we don't know what we know about adults now and what goes on, right? We just know as a kid's eye, it's like, I'm not being loved, so I must be unlovable.
Yes, and that's it, Jess. And with that, I believed what I was told.
Right.
And that was that I wasn't worth enough. And
Yes.
that I remember the time when I would hear people tell me something good, that I could do something good with my life, or you can change. And there's this recording that went on in my head that would counter that, saying, no, you're this and you're that and you're this. You'll never amount to anything. Don't even try it. I know you. I know you. Like, you can't, like, this recording that it took me a while to realize that this was a conditioning that had taken place. I was like, until I started thinking that maybe I could do what these wonderful people are telling me that I can change in my life, that I actually have a little bit of control, that I would be able to go into this place and into this heart and start opening it up for people to come in and like help take out the rotten and the hurt and the pain in there. And so, yeah.
That tape that we get as a result of life as we're living it as a young person can be so powerful, because it's it's programmed. I think you're right about that. To me, it's my shamer voice. It's the voice that could be pieces of things that happened with my parents. It could be, I had some really abusive teachers in my life. There have been things that I've picked up right along the way that become this like narrative all the time. And my voice sounds a lot like yours, in that those moments where I listen to the whisper inside, when I get really lit up about like, oh, there could be something more here. I could be doing this. That shamer voice is really hard to balance. And I know that I was reading in some of, I think, my research on you both, that therapy is an important tool in your life. It's something that has been instrumental in mine, to be able to have framework for what's happening and what happened, to be able to have community and support. But it's something I introduced in our marriage as well. Felipe my husband hadn't been to therapy before. And it's such a staple in what keeps us connected to ourselves. So actually, when I mentioned to you before we started recording that when we got married, we pledged to 7 principles and values in our life. And one of them, out of all of this, we actually didn't pledge to romantic love. We pledged to self-love.
Wow.
We felt like when we were in self-love, we could create that romantic love together, and receive it. Right. And we both knew that no matter what, the romantic love is what the world holds on to so much. It's all the attractive part of falling in love with somebody, right? And then it's real work to be in relationship and partnership with somebody. And we knew that, I think, because we got married a little later in life, but we pledged to, like, if we don't take care of us, then I cannot be a solid wife and partner to you. I can't give. And so I'm curious, I'm seeing you now, I'm curious if that's resonating for you too, as individuals coming from spaces of childhood, maybe, that whether it's pain or purpose, intentionality, faith, but like now that you come together as a couple, how does your early life, I guess, inform your vision of who you wanted to be as people and as a couple?
Oh man, Jess, that's so good. What comes to my heart about that, taking care of yourself first, that is, oh man, that was so far from the universe that I was from. Like, if I did take care of myself, it was like, oh, you're being selfish. You're like, it just was absolutely foreign. And to acquaint myself with that took time.
Yeah.
Even being able to stop my life and say, I cannot drink anymore. I cannot smoke. I don't even want that in this vessel anymore. Like, valuing myself enough to say that I, and all of those, drinking and smoking and doing that drugs was because of that hurt we were talking about earlier. I didn't know how to give voice to it.
Right.
I didn't know how to put a pulse on it. I knew something was not right, and I was drinking and smoking it and running it and relationshiping it away. And that moment that I was like, I need to stop. Like, I want to stop. I'm hungry to stop. I'm hungry for something that I'd never had, which was purity. Growing up being violated as a young girl, getting your purity taken from you,
Yeah.
that you're introduced and exposed to a whole new world. I mean, and that's like another conversation that we can have. I mean, you can ask away, and I don't want to go too far left, but just being able to now say, okay, even with the predators, the violators, I would never say anything to them or about them, because I knew if I shared anything that had happened to me and that this person had done this to me, that I knew what was going to happen to them. They were going to get into some serious trouble. And to me, I felt like, you know what, I'd rather just bear the burden. And that's not taking care of self. So the moment that I stopped and started going in my heart and saying, okay, love, I want to know about you.
Yeah.
Love, what do you look like? What, I mean, and just like really coming and wanting to know love.
Yeah.
Love
because
is
you
not
are love.
religion. But I didn't even know that. I had no idea that I didn't know what love was.
Yeah.
And so as an adult, finding out that I have the right to know what love is, to find out and explore love, came purity and pure thoughts and ability and power. So, and I'll close with this because, oh man, you got me riled up so good. The best analogy that really started to take place for me about self-care is, there's a wonderful saying that says, love your neighbor as yourself. It says your neighbor, but it says yourself first. Love your neighbor as yourself. Like, oh, got it. And that's number one. Number two was when I was in an airplane and the stewardess was giving the directions about, okay, this is what happens if we get into a crash. If your mask comes down, put it on you first and then put it on your child. And I was like, oh, that's self-love. That's taking care of yourself.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like we are sisters from another mister in so many ways because
mister, I love it.
because the trauma that you describe, that I actually think I'll venture to say almost every person listening or watching this program, if they're in contemplation about their upbringing, no matter what it's looked like or what their parents were or weren't, we go through trauma, I believe, in all different ways, but the kind of trauma that you're describing can imprint a pathway in life that many people go down, right? So lots of people after that trauma might stick with the drinking, the drugging, the relationshiping, the gambling, the everything we do over that tremendous pain. But it is quite remarkable to hear about I call them the whispers, because it's like those little elements of us inside that have always been there. Like we are love in our purest form, and coming back to that, to be able to be connected to that is so powerful.
High five, high five, high five. I'm high-fiving you.
Because the shows are called We're All Gonna Die Anyway, but I think we die many, many times before our physical bodies die. That part of you died of your life. There's loss in our life when we realize we want more, we deserve better, we can change a pathway that, we didn't think was possible. Those are all deaths. Those are losses. But on the other side is a gain. I could hear the gain in your voice as you were talking about that.
Yes. So much.
Does that resonate for you too, Derek, in your journey? Do you have those voices as well in your head, kind of the things telling you what is or what isn't possible when you were younger?
Sophia and I, there's parts of our upbringing that we share some similarities. And so I think one area where, because right now society is talking about, and it's not about color as it is about voice. And, right now people are talking about chokeholds. And sometimes you realize as a kid that there's certain chokeholds that's put on you. And one of the chokeholds for me was how to resolve conflict in my home. And early on, you become sort of the mediator between, sad and happy, destructive and constructive. You become, you're a child dealing with adult problems, and you sort of learn how to resolve things in your heart, and for me, I don't believe that relationships or marriage was a resolve. I think I made a determination, a decision that I would allow, or I wouldn't make the boundaries that I saw, witnessed, observed as a kid to be a limitation in my marriage. However, I realize, as you shared, that whether you take a couch from therapy, whether it's a spiritual therapy, that, a decision to go forward is also a decision to explore. So even though I made that decision, I realized that there was still the excavating of a relationship. And I thought my decision for success was built on me saying I don't want conflict. But so marriage, the stadium of marriage, that doesn't exist. You know what I mean? And so, and I've seen how that has played out in my professional life as well.
I love that phrase, the stadium of marriage.
Yeah.
I love that. You sound a little bit like my husband in that one of the lessons we have together, both as people who are excavating our childhoods and choosing to be different adults and wanting to be more purposeful and intentional in the world, is it is really hard, depending on your upbringing, for different reasons, but it can be very hard to ask for what you need and to ask for help. And he has specifically talks about this a lot. And actually, I got to interview him for this show too, which I've never done before, interview my own husband. But he shared a lot about his machiste background and the expectation of a Mexican male to be buttoned up and, non-emotional. And my husband is like the most sweetest, generous, loving man in the world. And I think about him as a little boy being tempered down, all of those feelings, right? And you have a son now, I imagine, who's like, he's just love, right? We go back to that original source. And to think that my husband had to compartmentalize those desires to express himself. But conflict is one that comes up in our stadium of marriage too, because it's very scary for him to ask sometimes for what he needs, especially in those vulnerable places. It goes against his programming that he thinks he's had as a man.
So
wow.
good.
Yeah.
That's
wow.
really good.
Wow. Yeah. That's having a right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I share something that's so cute, Jess? Just on this topic is so precious. Derek has taught me so much by I just really thank God for him, because all of who I am today, I attribute to my divine, amazing love of, God through Derek to me. Like, he's so sweet. I just have to tell you, this is so cute. We're talking about voice, and as a man being able to share what's on your heart and this whole conflict thing. So he wants a peaceful home. So it was so sweet as he began we realized that we can tell things to one another that, hey, I don't really like this. Can we change it? So one day when he was telling me about me picking up my clothes, because I would just like get the laundry, put them on the bed. If I'm tired, I just put them on a floor of pillows, and I don't like get it to the next day or maybe 2 days later. And so Derek's so sweet. He goes, honey, do you think that you can, fold those clothes, maybe put them away? It was so sweet. I was like, copy, I got you. Yeah, but just his, he didn't come out like, get those clothes out of here. He just was so sweet about it.
But isn't that funny? Because it's like, it's such a beautiful, if you do get the blessing and the benefit to be in a relationship where you have two intentional partners, What I notice a lot about our relationship is the tenderness is a choice also. Like there are ways, just like you said, there are ways that line could have been delivered, right? And there's ways we could unload on our partner, maybe because we feel safe with them, maybe because, but to choose tenderness, peace, yeah, she's pointing at you.
Tenderoni.
Like but I've learned that also from my husband, because I have a harshness like that I've worked on in my life that is like my high-fiving on that. That is, so it's interesting then who we attract to work through life with a little bit, right? To kind of, we're a good balance, right? The harshness for me has served to be hyper vigilant. It's very productive. It's very, directed. I'm super type A. So I told you we're sisters from another mister. And then my husband, his tenderness, I think for me reminds me that I deserve that for myself as well, that I can also stop the beat down that I might still give myself of the things that are expected. But it's a blessing. I guess what I'm picking up on in your dynamic, which is sweet and intentional, is what I keep coming back to, is like when you choose that, then the excavating, Derek, that you're talking about, it's vulnerable, but it is so necessary, because the deeper you go, the stronger you get.
Yeah.
And people, I think, leave sometimes, or, bow out of that discomfort, because it's a lot. It's a lot to do your work and your work together as a team.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the maintenance comes in. Like, you go to Jiffy Lube, or, well, I haven't been to Jiffy Lube for a while, but we go to our dealership where our car's from to keep it, within. But Jiffy Lube, we go into our cars, we brush our teeth, we floss, we do these minor maintenances. But when were we taught this in school that, hey, this is something that garners great attention and tenderness and love and cultivating? So
I also think it's so interesting that you were both drawn to performing and crafting stories, telling stories, listening. I mean, obviously, Derek, just in this interaction, I can almost feel you processing. I love that you use the word unpacking. I can tell how thoughtful you are in a conversation, hearing probably into all of these nuances. I want to talk about that a little bit, and kind of how creativity serves a life purpose as well, because I was reading, I think, and hopefully these quotes are accurate, because you can't always believe what you read these days, but I think I was reading an interview that you did when you were talking about Antwone Fisher, and you said you thought that would give birth to a career, but it gave, for your career, but that it gave birth to a purpose. For you. And that, like, I wrote that down and kind of circled it, because I thought, yeah, I want to know more about that. Let me ask you two questions. I guess the first one is, talk to me about how creativity served you in your life and serves you in your life. Like, how does that become an important piece of how you express yourself in the world? And then I want to talk about the purpose that you found in expressing yourself.
So the first question is, how
does the creativity serve you in taking all of which you've lived and learned? And why is it so important for you? Why this field? Why this career? Why this kind of passion?
Wow. Well, that's a good question. Well, I think the main question for me was, as I shared, that I was raised in a divinely, a divine culture. And so, even though I was a kid and I would run and go to the store and wouldn't, pay attention and service and all that, one thing it did do for me is that it created a core. And I just was meditating on that word, core, or cardia, means where life flows. And so for me, expression is where my life flows. And so I know, I like to touch people. I didn't know that it would be in the arts, because maybe like many other people that you see a movie and you walk away dreaming, or you see a action movie and you walk away with your friends doing karate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why or what, but I know, the win, in the sense that, I know I asked, God. I was like, the question came out was, what were you thinking when you made me?
Hmm.
And because the algebra of life was too complicated, too many formulas. There was too many spaces that I could didn't could fit in and didn't fit in.
Yeah.
From college to sports to going to the military, none of those felt like they fit me. My utility belt. And
Mhm.
so it really made me start to ask. And I didn't know that asking is a form of desire, and
Mm.
desire means hunger. And so I realized that until I was hungry, was I really able to eat.
Mm.
And so when I remember one of the things I began to do is I began to bow out of my social gatherings with my friends, and that basically simply was you would spend money, or you put money on layaway to go to a club. You made minimum wage. I lived with my mom, relative, my grandma, and I just felt like it took too long to get to the end goal. So, I just began. Next door to my work was uh, a movie rental, and it was this African American guy. It wasn't. It was the. It was the urban neighborhood version of Blockbuster. And
Blockbuster.
he began to, I began to hear about these Black exploitation films,
Mhm.
and I knew they weren't well done, and I knew that the sexual scenes in there, I really had to hide from my family. But after I got finished exploiting the Black exploitation and going through puberty, that basically you know, I went in there and become a regular. This guy showed me a movie, and it was Malcolm X.
Mm.
And in my home, as noble as Malcolm was, he wasn't a character that was accepted nor nominated in my home.
Mm.
And so, but I wasn't looking at the man Malcolm. I was looking at Denzel's Malcolm.
Mhm.
And there was something about his Malcolm that spoke to a Malcolm in my heart, meaning that I wanted to
Mm.
say something. And I felt like I was, too young to say something, or too young to say something that serious.
Mm.
But I began to watch him, and I began to watch the few others that begin to speak to my heart. And so I realized that no matter what I did, I wanted to say something.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to harness that. So, audition for me was experimental, so I went from dramas to comedies and then finally, I explored, man, which one am I getting feedback on the most? And it was drama.
Mm.
And, I forgot about how I wanted to connect with people and all that. And then, out of a long process, Antwone Fisher came, and when Antwone Fisher came, it it felt like it was my level of smartness, my level of
Mm.
you know of of speaking. It was my speaking, um, and it was the glove that fit.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you,
Hmm.
I wasn't from a drama background where I can assess and do this and that. I went into um, the field. I went into drama like I did when I was in the car with my grandmother. I went there going, I could see myself.
Yeah.
And so when I began to see, then, the recipe to be, because be means to exist. So
Yep.
I began to be it in my heart and think
Mm-hmm.
it in my heart. And, as Sophia said, is if I have been something in her life, she was just as much or triple in mine.
Mm-hmm.
To meet her and say, you're a star.
Mm.
And, the concerns I had about a movie that I wasn't even cast in, she was just like, all that will melt away.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think essentially I wanted to be good at something. I wanted to
Mm.
impact my generation. And I think that's what divine culture and environment did for me. It says that everybody is a preacher, but not everybody is a teacher. So what are you teaching the
Mm.
generation? You know what I mean?
Yes.
So,
And that purpose, wow. First of all, thank you for taking us on that journey. And I resonate with it for a couple of reasons, but I'm grateful for it specifically because I think we worship at the altar of celebrity in this culture so much, and we forget about people and people's journeys. And I actually think, and not just celebrity, I think even like CEOs, business, like we're always looking for like the shortcut, pretty version of people's journeys, right? We want it to be like concise in a soundbite and fit our rationale of what it looks like. And what I appreciate about your story and just a little bit that we got to hear was you were already on a journey as a human, you
mm,
know, excavating, learning, being curious, listening. I was reading, I think, in your background as well, that you spent a lot of time observing your neighborhood, observing people. And so,
mhm,
why I think that's important for people listening to know is that sometimes the things that we are most called to do, we're already doing,
mm,
right? But we always think it always lands if somebody else says it's okay or somebody else gives you that job. Like, I think you were doing all the things, it sounds like, of being a great actor in your life,
mm,
observing, listening, reacting, exploring, understanding emotional context. So when I hear it, the way all those pieces come together, you were
mhm,
already on this journey. And yeah, it's incredibly fortunate that you had a piece of material that spoke to you so
mhm,
profoundly. And how ironic too that Denzel's Malcolm was also an informing force in your
mhm.
life. That goes back to that quote of like, coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. Like,
Uh,
there's
yeah.
just something in there. And I just appreciate hearing the nuance because I don't think we get to respect that enough about people's journeys, you know?
No, no, you're right. And when you were talking about the observing, even when that came out, it was like a piece of my life that I saw but didn't have the
Mm.
rest of the painting. And this now, when you said what you said, I walked away with the story.
Mhm.
And, I used to tell myself so many stories. And that's what imagining is.
Yeah.
Imagining is storytelling. It's telling the story from your point of view. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It doesn't have the editors. It's just yours. And I would, and I believe I told stories about my dad, and I think
Mm.
I told stories about being in a more different environment in my family, and then more importantly, when I saw stories that I really, connected to, I realized that I would let the story play, and
Mm.
I just, and I just live in those stories. So,
Yeah. The important part too about the stories, why I'm passionate about doing some of the work that I do with larger institutions or platforms is I think for whatever reason, I think I've always known that I've wanted to be a force for change or a force for systemic change. I didn't have those words when I was a kid. I just knew that I was a kid who also, by the way, I also have a theater background. So I also think creative people, We kind of like see each other. But I went to all these performing arts schools and I studied and I loved telling stories, but I was always fascinated with who was the gatekeeper for the stories that were getting told. I remember being 12 years old and watching TV and being like, why doesn't anybody look like me or my friends on TV? And
Mm,
having that story in like the 80s when like I didn't have a whole lot of opportunity to watch a variety of stories, right? Like, and I grew up always curious, like who says that person gets it and that person doesn't.
Good.
So it's funny that, or not funny, but divinely ordered as well, that my life and my life's work has been about questioning the who
Ooh.
and then changing the what and changing the who, like changing Barbie's body, helping to launch, the Dove campaign for real beauty, working with studios now on how do you open up so more stories are told so that more people are seen. And that's
mm,
what I was thinking about too, Sophia, when I was reading about your passion in this space and your desire to be seen, not only as that little girl we were talking about, but as a performer as well. I
Mhm.
mean, we disappear almost all Black, Indigenous people of color from stories that we're consuming in mainstream culture, but also, and I know, a huge part of that is, and they say this a lot, you can't be what you can't see, but to disappear somebody
Mhm.
changes their entire narrative of existence.
mm,
Right. And I remember reading that was an important part for you too, that you wanted to see Hispanic Latina women represented in a way that felt like you existed, that were parts of your story.
Totally. Wow.
mm, mm. Wow.
How does that how does that resonate for you as you looked at the industry and choosing that creative path? Was that an aware driving force, or does that happen once you get into the business and then you realize what doors are
Ah,
closed or open?
well, when I was a little girl in the midst of the pain, there was
Yeah.
that light in here,
Mm,
that inner voice saying, like, I wanted to be a star. I wanted to be a star and that I wanted to change the world with love. And I remember that in the really roughest part of my childhood. And that like little silent
yeah.
love whisper was that scarlet thread through my life. So now fast forward to, wanting to be a star because I had gotten into this lifestyle of just drinking and it was all about me.
Yeah.
Everything was about me because life owed me something. Everybody owed me something because I went through this and it's my time. Then
Mm-hmm.
when I came to that place where I just stopped in life and I was like, okay, things have to change, is when that star changed to I want to give this love that I have in my heart now to the world through my gift.
Mm.
And that's when everything started changing and I went into the area of production and different things like that. But I remember just the first time I saw a woman on the cover of a magazine that looked like me,
Mm.
I didn't know that I was missing out.
Yeah.
And when I saw, I was like, oh, I couldn't even say anything. But yes,
Yeah.
it was beautiful.
Because we swallow it down as truth, right? We're not supposed to exist. We don't exist. I mean, that's how we absorb the systemic part of it. It
Mhm.
Mm,
becomes
I
we
didn't know.
believe it.
And
Right.
I didn't even like know that. Oh, like when I did one of the first projects that I did in acting, and I was the lead in it, and they said, "Oh my gosh, this is really heavy. How did you do it?" And I was like, oh, "I didn't know that I couldn't.
Mm.
I didn't know that I couldn't." So when I saw that
Yeah.
magazine, I didn't know it even existed, and that is possible because I'd seen the predominant,
Yep.
Caucasian,
Yeah.
covers. So it was very affirming for me, and I felt like this feels really wonderful, and I want other people to feel wonderful too.
Mhm. Yeah, there is something quite important about reclaiming our individual narratives as
Mhm.
people, obviously, but then being able to translate that. I mean, look at what the world turned to at the beginning of COVID, when we were all sort of on lockdown in our homes. We turned to the artists and we turned to the storytellers and we turned to the creatives, right? The musicians. Like the need to tell a story in a creative way is historic. It predates, certainly our lives here and our ancestors' lives, but it's changing now, right? It's changing, I think, because we all have these devices that allow us to be storytellers all the time.
Mm.
I even think about the young woman, I believe she's 17, the young woman who recorded George Floyd's death on her phone.
Oh,
I heard that.
She's 17 years old. To be in a possession of that moment, right? To record that horror, but share it and watch what that could initiate and spark, right? I think about what I mean, we haven't talked about her a lot in our culture yet. But I think about her all the time about like, what will her life be like now? To know and that was obviously a story she was witnessing, but she was living that, right? And
Mhm.
and she shared that. But I think about kids, I think about your kids, your young son, like at 4.5, like the kind of technology and storytelling that will be available to him to shape his world and to shape other people's worlds, and
Mhm.
how that's a responsibility too.
Mhm.
Do you feel that, Derek, in this business now and in your career path, that the
Mhm.
purpose maybe supersedes some of the shinier stuff that we often get attached to? When I hear you say you found your purpose, and I think about people who have that in our system of Hollywood, which has so many, it's tricky. It's tricky
Mhm.
because what we value and, kind of what we admire can be all of the accolades and the public adoration. And that oftentimes doesn't have a ton to do with purpose. Sometimes things resonate with people because of other reasons, right? Because somebody
Mhm.
put a lot of money into a marketing campaign, not
Yeah.
because the piece of work is actually worthy, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess I'm just curious for you, as you think about your artistry and the career that you're building and creating.
Mhm.
I guess I'm asking, is purpose driving more than whatever the result might be from the work?
Um, Boy, that's a great question. Well, I could say someone like Denzel has told
Mm,
me as a man,
mm,
a an actor, a man of color, on how he holds himself, and you know, and what was interesting about that is I believe I hit a wall. And
mm.
that wall was I was trying to repeat, but my job is to complete.
Whoa.
And so, when I realized that no one was, born incidental, but more intentional, then, it's like you know, there was a race that we were in, and I had never done a marathon, and I won't really credit this as a marathon, but when I saw the 3K, the 5K, the 6K, I'm just thinking, okay, will will I be okay? So there was uh, you know, there was a person there. It was actually Terry Crews,
Mm,
and Terry and I had met, and we were, acquaintance. And what it was that he was just beginning to launch his career, but we would find ourselves in these moments or these places together. And I remember getting into the race and wanting to give up. And Terry wasn't he he wasn't going fast, but he had something. He had a pace.
interesting.
And so,
Interesting.
art should be a pace.
Mm,
And nobody knows really the pace you should run except you.
that's right.
And so I credit Terry with setting a pace that I can keep up.
Mm,
And so um, I, and, when again, and what I realize is that so that pace or giving up, I have been considered because I thought at moments that accolades should have come
Yep.
with my performance, but then I realized that, am I willing to keep up the pace when, you know what I'm saying? When
Mhm.
I'm determining, or I had to I'm determined now that my existence is enough for me to keep up the pace.
Mm.
And so awards are nice. I am a person of intention, meaning I believe that words can hurt you, build you, but they can also keep you on path. They can allow you to win. So, but I realized the real joy is the pace,
Mm.
and the pace, and it affects everything. It affects my taste, my choice, and so yeah.
I'm just smiling literally from my toes to my head because I've never heard that framed in that way, but it resonates so deeply with me because the pace that, as you describe the pace, I describe it in my own words as la buena vida, is the good life. Like what is it? And being on your own path is one of my like key principles of living a good life.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, and interesting, I'll match your race story with my own. I did a marathon a million years ago. Um, my first and only marathon, and I ran it alone in Hawaii. It was the AIDS marathon. And I remember being like, why am I doing this? And it took me 8 hours to finish that marathon because I am not a runner. But I remember two things happened to me. One was, of course, everybody was faster than me. Most people, I think I had like me and like maybe 3 octogenarians at the end of the race. And I was like, I could compare myself, and I did every time somebody passed me up. And you know what it would do? It would slow me down.
Oh, good.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing I did was I was at mile 24, 25.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like a mile and a half left to go, 2 miles to go. And I was figuring out all the reasons in my head to stop. I was so close to finishing, and I could give myself a million reasons to stop. And so what I learned was to say to myself, right here, right now, right here, right now, right here, right now. That was my mantra as I was running, right here, right now, right now. And when I finished, and there were like 2 people left at the finish line to give me my little, thing, my trophy, my thing. I thought, oh my God, I remember I was 20. Must have been 27 years old. Maybe it was like 20 years ago I did this. I remember thinking, this is life. This is my race to run, and I will do it the way I do it, how I do it. But if I'm not present for it, then I miss it all. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm comparing myself to your career and your body and your money and your this and your that, I will never show up for my life.
Whoa.
Even if no one was there to watch it.
Yeah.
Because at that point I didn't have an audience. Nobody was around. They were like cleaning up behind us as we were running, like taking the. And I thought, but shit, my goal was to finish it. And I did. So I love that applied to the creative arts, you can talk about pace as your process, your path, your journey, but your tempo.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think sometimes when we're artists or creators, or even as an entrepreneur, you put so much in the hands of other people, right? You're waiting for somebody to say yes to something. And
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes their path feels like my path. Like I'm like, I have to keep up. So I love that I love the idea, and this is what I'm working on actively, to decide what is it that makes a good life for me? What will be important for me?
Mm-hmm.
Versus all these other stimulus out there.
Yeah, no, and for whoever's listening, like that's the number one way to be disappointed or let down, is not finding out what is your pace, because I mean, you look at ones and you're like, man, they ran the same thing and they were celebrated.
Right.
And And so it's not, there isn't anything wrong in my eyes of being celebrated. But, as again, when you were talking, like, I just remember uh, the race. I remember, um, the last day of Antwone Fisher, and that day was over. And the 2 or 3 months that I was with Mr. Washington, that I literally saw a visual for you when you were saying you were running and they were cleaning up. And it almost looked like everyone went with the winner.
Yeah.
And it was surreal. I mean, it was, trying to describe it, but again, after Antwone, nobody's calling your name, no one's knocking on your trailer. And then that was the moment I was like, this is the moment I have to start my own pace.
Yeah.
And I have to run my race, and I have to run it with pace. I have to run it with faith, and I have to run it with conviction. And to me, that is the accolade, is that I ran my race with faith and conviction.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, and all of us, are sometimes faced with the scenery that, wait a minute, man, they're cleaning up around here. And so when you said that, I literally saw like a intro commercial for your podcast, for you. And it had comedy to it, but it had concept.
Yeah.
And it had depth. And so literally, you know what I'm saying? If you can make people laugh, smile, but think, that right there, you have to put that as a teaser, as a
I
trailer.
love it. I will do that. I will take that and do that. Yeah. It's funny, that I think the part, and what's making me light up too in these conversations, is joy. Like, there's also great joy that we can have, even in the midst of, reliving a lot of, reliving, whether it's past pain or trauma or the things obviously that we're expressing and experiencing in the world. Joy is a great act of resistance as well, and a great act of importance. I think, and I know I was reading too, like, joy is important for the both of you, and purpose, I know, is important for the both of you. And outside of your career pursuits, you've aligned on some things that are very meaningful. So I want to talk about those. I want to talk about the Science Genius work, and I want to talk about King's Night. I want to talk about where the other parts of you light up and bring you joy. So Sophia, will you share with me too a little bit about why why Science Genius, what sparks that for you, and what, I want to know more about what lit you up about that work.
Well, the greatest thing, the best thing about Science Genius and how it lit me up was education. For me, was doo-doo. It was just doo-doo.
That's the formal word for it.
Yes, it was such doo-doo. And it's interesting because in high school, you know how they nominate people that, oh, she's going to be this and she's going to be that. And well, mine was most likely to burn a textbook. Yes.
Okay, so that was your relationship with formal schooling.
That's perfect. That's a perfect description of my education. And, we were just, Jess, there was times when it was just so much chaos at home. Going to school was really awesome. But going to class was like, I don't need another problem here because I've got it there. So you know what? I'm going to do a whole lot of cheating. I'm going to do a whole lot of copying and just passing. And so my backstory of school wasn't that great. So when we met Professor Emden, first we were given a script, and the script was about like a To Sir with Love meets, what's the other story? Lean on Me, with hip hop culture. In this like beautiful braid of creativity. Wow. And I was like, ooh, this is beautiful. This is wonderful. So Derek read it, and he's like, something's missing. We have the script for 10 years. I'm still thinking like, how can we fine tune it? So I get a hold of a word through somebody that says the word pedagogy, or it's pedagogy. And we've just all flipped it to pedagogy because we like the swag of it. So look up the name, find Professor Emden. 10 hours later, tweeting him. We're on the phone. 10 minutes into our conversation, we're telling him about this story, how we believe that he's like the missing link to that story. And 10 minutes into the conversation, he's, emotional, and he's saying, you guys are telling me my life story. And we're like, what? So by the end of the entire conversation, he's like, your family, we just had that divine connection.
Wow.
And from that moment on, I literally thought, you're going to understand this mindset. Okay, great. We have the script. We have the missing link. He's a consultant. Let's go in. Let's rock this movie. Everybody, we're going to do this in 3 months. My personality and production. Let's go.
Yep.
And it's been 7 years. And what happened was Professor Emden invited us to Science Genius and on the East Coast. So we went, and when I saw what was happening, it was education that I had never even dreamed of.
Really?
I was like, I want to go back to school because of this, but a new school. And the systems of the world are exhausting themselves. My son is currently watching a cartoon called Hero Elementary, and it's about science. Today, Jess, you are going to love this niblet. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Today on the cartoon, they said, life is like a kernel of popcorn. Once it pops, it can't go back to the same. So basically stop trying to get it to go back. Don't. It has done its work. And I was like, this is education. I love it.
Wow.
The level of, so back to Science Genius.
Tell people what Science Genius is.
Science Genius is the intersection of hip hop culture and education.
Amazing.
The way that, the music, the lyrics, what the young people are talking about, the discovery of Nikes, how a Nike's made, the discovery of how diamonds are made, and then being able to spit that out in verse.
Yeah.
Oh man, and people are bumping and having a good time, and these young people we're becoming the student and they're becoming the teacher.
Yeah.
So when I saw that, I was like, I want to be a part of this. And the first sole purpose for Science Genius was to serve the underserved communities.
Okay.
And that's my lane, like big time. So when I saw these young people succeeding at a level that they didn't even know was in them, and that we were able to be a part of helping to pull out or help them discover the greatness in them and them shine and before all of these people, and most especially for themselves, I'm like, I'm done. And then it was 7 years down this rabbit hole of really understanding the work. So what turned into a movie now turned into a movement. And now we have a better taste. Like we've been simmering with this information. So now when it comes out, it's going to be able to feel the spirit of what we're doing.
Don't you also think those projects and those pieces have their own pace, right? They have their own timing.
Yeah.
You were saying it started as a movie, it became a movement. And then what I heard in my head was, and now it's a mission, right? It is like a movie, a movement, a mission, because, but I do think, and we hear that a lot from great artists and storytellers, like the time that it takes to germinate, to really root, it also can match culture and where culture's at. So I was just thinking right now, even as you gave that popcorn example, like once a kernel pops, that's life, and then don't try to let it go back. I'm thinking all these people who keep talking about when life goes back to normal. And I'm like, I don't want life to go back to that normal. And by the way, the toothpaste is out of the tube. It's not. We're forever changed, and thankfully so. And let's keep that going. But I love that those are concepts given to young people, because to me, that it sounds like what Science Genius does is it also inserts life into the academia. It inserts real life into
spirit,
into that.
Life, heart, love.
Love,
Jess, the love. Like, I mean, that's you can tell I just get so
I
lit
know
up.
you got lit up. Wait, so is it work also for as kids as young as, like, when does it start? Because your son is 4.5. So
so our main focus, Professor Emden and his team's main focus was high school.
Okay.
But being the COVID, once COVID-19 hit, we opened it. Professor Emden wanted to open it up to the world. So young people, old people, educators, counselors, teachers, we have news anchors who are being a part of it now. Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So, okay. Oh my God. This is going to be like a 14-part podcast. Okay. I have a couple more questions for us, and then clearly we have to hang out. I want to talk about King's Night. Can we talk about King's Night a little bit? I know you're wearing the hat right now, but when I was reading about it and the intentionality behind it, it also feels very of the moment, much like Science Genius is, as far as like opening up people to themselves in a different way. Will you talk a little bit about how King's Night, like what it is and
Yeah.
how it's come to be?
So King's Night is a day of discovery. And we have a mentor, and he has a program, and in that program there is a exercise, and that exercise is about realizing the true you, or who you are. And I remember, and Sophia helped me out, is that part of this exercise is, he said that there are a group of young people, or people that lined up, and and he uses language like, you play in my sandbox, and he has them all bow their head down. And
Which one is it?
It's the exercise when,
Is it corridor?
no, it's the exercise when he they're sort of acting like, if they're
Would you let your light shine?
yeah, like if they're sad,
Yeah.
and he comes and speaks a
Yes,
word.
exactly. They're all wilted flowers.
Mhm.
And so he has a line of people come up and be a wilted flower. And then he talks about the power of words and depositing words into a spirit, into your heart, into your soul. And then, like, say, if you put your head down, then he'll come and he'll lift up his head, your head, and he'll deposit words into your heart. And then as you hear these words of positive impartation and affirmation of who you are, you begin to blossom into your full purpose.
Yeah. And so King's Night is a discovery of who they are. And the scenario is, behind it is that for every kid or every person, you usually hear 25 negative words to every positive word.
Yeah.
And so we come with a king's word, and the king's word is that everybody has a king inside of them. And you're not kings rule, but you're not supposed to rule over people. You're supposed to rule over your gift. And so the question of King's Night is, do you know your gift? And the spiritual side of it is, do you know your gift giver? And a lot of people, some people find out their gift, and then they begin to try to figure out how to make their gift work. But the thing about, a gift is, you should turn back and say, how do I use this? What is this for? And so, you may be talented, you may have, great accolades, but are you living? Are you in purpose? And so King's Night is a night of purpose. It's a night of discovery. It's a night of love. It's a night of positive bombardment. And
really pouring into
and we pour in, and sometimes when we've gone to King's Night, it's times when I'm tired and I don't want to be there, but I get there, and every time I get there, there's somebody who felt like they needed a lifeline.
Yeah.
And
is it for men and women, or is it just men?
It was, we were being sort of voted, and the women wanted to know where their men were for so long. But it is devoted to men.
Amen. Yeah.
And then and again, like I have mentors, or had mentors that I have elected who I haven't met. And the other side to a king, and please hear it not as a misogynistic point of view, but I have been told all my life that men are the head of their household. And one of my mentors gave me food for thought. He said, Derek, men are not the head of the household, they're the foundation. And so I said, well, if they're the foundation, and knowing that I'm a man, and knowing that as a man of color, as a man of faith, that there are a bunch of men around me whose foundation is cracked, then let King's Night be a place that cements it, you know what I mean? And repurpose it or strengthens it. So
it also sounds like an incredible and necessary place to be with the walls down for men in our culture right now, to have a safe place to explore, to be poured into, to be sharing. You know, we don't create a lot of opportunity for that in our world.
Well said.
That's good that you said that, Jess, because that's one of the analogies Derek and I use a lot, is pouring into. And it can just be a smile.
Yeah.
A hug, a recognition, being called a king, like just pouring into people is so important. And what good are we if we have information and we don't share it? Like sharing is, even with our, my Native American culture, when you come over to somebody's house, the joy of what you're going to bring, some fried bread or even corn, whatever, it doesn't matter. It was never the amount of what was brought, but the spirit and the love behind it, the intention behind that. So we really, the love is the main ingredient of what we deposit. We play specific kind of music before the guys come in. We greet them as kings, and we get more blessed, I think, than they do.
How does in our whole conversation right now, it's been so imbibed with spirit, intentionality, purpose, healing. I would say this is my impression of what we've talked about, right? There's a devotion to understanding, healing, repairing, and creating anew, right? How much does that play out in how you're choosing to parent your son, especially in a time right now? Like, how are you, does that play front and center for you from a philosophical standpoint as you look at raising the next generation?
Wow.
That's a good question. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious how much of the conversation and the intentionality that we've had right now about your work and your relationship and your relationship to yourselves, how does that show up in your parenting?
Oh, Jess, you got great questions. They're so juicy. Is it okay if I
you go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. We're very joyfully intentional with our son. Every morning, even if we're running late, every morning we always play positive praise music. Like we're listening to the spirit of the fruit of the spirit is joy, love, peace, happiness, joy. And he'll say, I like that. It was a really good video. It resonated with me. We're like, good. But we're very intentional, and we do it with fun. And joy, the words, we ask him the question. First, we teach him what's good for his spirit and what's not good for his spirit, because we teach him what comes in is eventually going to come out, son. So when he'll go to YouTube and he'll flick on something that's not so good, we'll then ask him a question. Son, is that good for your spirit or bad for your spirit? And he'll tell me, it's not good for my spirit, mommy. We'll be like, okay, great. And that's, we teach him, we teach him. It's a very, we're very intentional about the things that we do, but again, we lace it with so much fun and love, and he is serious comedy. So that's how, in essence, it plays out in our life with him. And also teaching him, learning how to listen to love in our lives and how to teach him, because he loves drums. So while we're teaching him the ABCs, we'll get drumsticks
Mhm.
and place them in the form of an A. So he's more drawn to it, like
Yep.
all these little different intentions. And then how to, we don't have siblings yet. They're
Mhm.
coming, come on.
Yeah.
But he's got
Mhm.
cousins. So with his girl cousins, we teach him how to open the door for her, how to treat her, how to speak to her. So and it's
Mhm.
purposeful. He loves it. He soaks it up.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, of course it did, because I can look in Derek's eyes too as you were talking. You could see it all playing out. Yeah, because I think, look, we started off the conversation talking about your childhoods, right? And whether it was pain was one of the central words, purpose was another, but we talked about some of the losses, right? And what I loved in hearing your conversation right now was the gains that you have because of that,
Oh
right?
God.
You've structured a life in which, and that's, I think, the whole point of this, of these conversations for me is like, look, we have an end date. We expire at some point, to be determined. We don't often know, right?
Mhm.
But with the time that we have, how do we live more urgently into our purpose? How do we live with more joy? How do we live with more intentionality? Not that it's a race actually, but that it's your own pace. I'm going to lift that a little bit from what you shared, because it speaks to me. And so I guess my last question, even though I don't want our conversation to end, but my last question is, knowing that we are all going to die. And I know that that's a hard thing for us to think about, especially with young children and, all that stuff. But I'm curious, it lights us up to talk about living and to talk about urgency. And so I'm curious for each of you, what you are urgently wanting to create in your life right now. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be a material thing. It could be a lesson. I don't know. It could be anything, but I'm curious, like, and Sophia, I'll start with you. Like, what is most urgent? I know. What is most urgent for you right now in your life?
Being present,
Mm.
being there. Yes, we have a lot going on in the world and people are anxious to get out. But this is a time to be so present in here in my heart, to be present like with him when we're sitting on the couch, like to be present when we're eating and talking. And when I'm with my son, yes, I have a slew of emails, but be present with him and not have that gnawing and pulling at me, but to be fully present is my big takeaway in this season, because he will not be 4.5 again. We
Mhm.
will like, this is such a beautiful, precious moment to really go inside and take inventory and
Mhm.
do what when you do spring cleaning, go in the heart and just do some spring cleaning and be so
Mhm.
gentle and easy and forgive yourself quick.
Mm.
Condemnation and guilt can really take a lot of mental real estate. That really creativity you can pour into that, and just be present with that moment. That's for me.
I
Mhm.
love that. High
Mhm.
five, high five, high five,
Bye,
high
bye,
five.
bye, bye.
Mhm.
What about you, Derek? What are you
Mhm.
urgently?
To rub
Um,
my feet. He's
yeah.
so good at that too.
Um, so I believe it has bled in from the last uh, question answer, and as you guys were talking, you were asking the question, Sophia was talking. Um, I've I've always had a desire to be what other people have been to me, and what that means and how it relates to me and my family is that there are a couple of very important people or important families that have been around us. And we have got a chance to be their corridor, their listening ear.
Mm.
And my, and so in doing that, I created this theme in my heart called like the first family. And so what's important for me for Emmanuel is that I be to that that like what I endeavor to be to them, those first families, their grandkids, that I want a world to be that for my son. And usually from those first families is usually somebody in the family who has made a ultimate sacrifice. And that whether it's integrity, whether it is a determination to complete the vision. But I wanted Emmanuel to be raised and be the fruit of something I did purposefully. Because the takeaways sometimes when I'm hearing jaw-dropping stories that people have no idea about these very notable people is not so much what I hear or what I'm being told, but how do I treat that information? And so I believe that Emmanuel, based on who he is, based on how such a good-looking boy he is, that I can see his legacy. And my heart is that he be around people that will keep that integrity intact. And in order to do that is that I have to complete what I started. And you know, it's I know it's very broad, but you know, literally,
It feel broad to me.
Yeah.
It feels like legacy is a big part of living a good life, right? And when you have a child, you want them to pick up that legacy. To me, what I heard, what you were talking about, was this investment in community and a community and a family that would be there as a structure for your son
Yeah.
because you were also there for them. Was that
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yes. And I realized, you know, how important, or I realized that the best thing I can give those people was my integrity. And the integrity that I wanted to give them was the integrity that that person in that family had sold into the community. And so I said, man, I would love for Emmanuel sort of to be in the back seat going, my dad sold that integrity. And even if I don't want to, even if I don't feel like it, I have to continue. You know what I mean?
Yes, because
Yeah.
it's all present around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do get what you mean, and I also feel like that's part of, sounds like you're the calling and the gift in showing up is you show your son how to do that, you know, and you're living it. My urgency in this is accomplished in what we created right now, which I've had this urgency for connection. Connection has been something, even though we're the most connected world with our technology and all that stuff, the connection I miss. And so this journey of these conversations, whether we talk, I said, we're talking about life, death, everything in between. Sometimes it's the everything in between. Sometimes it's one or the other. But for me to know that we were strangers before this conversation, that you entrusted me with the time that you've offered to be in communication and in connection is so, I'm so grateful for it. I feel so lit up from the inside to be able to share your experiences, to contextualize a little bit for people listening so that they also know where to find themselves in our stories, and for people to know that they're not alone in whatever it is, whatever part of our conversations today they heard their life reflected in. That connection for me feels very urgent, especially right now where we can feel and spend more time on the disconnection. The connection is joyful for me. So truly from the bottom of my heart, I cannot thank you enough for the time and the trust and the communication that we had today. I feel really, really lucky.
Thank you,
Well,
Jess.
we're honored. We're blessed. Thank you for you know, allowing us to eat and roll up our sleeves and get you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Whoo, boy. I love that conversation so much. I love it for so many reasons. I knew that I was excited to talk to them. I mentioned that in the beginning, what I read, what I knew about them or thought I knew about them. I was excited to dig in. But I don't think I was nearly as excited as when we just started talking and it felt like this instant connection and this camaraderie. And like, seriously, Sophia is a sister from another mister. Like there was just so much connection that I really needed that I'm hoping this program and these conversations give to you as you listen and watch. I love the fact that, we were strangers before we started and they were so generous with their stories, how transparently they shared about their lives. I feel very, very grateful and blessed to have received their stories and that they trusted me enough to share that with somebody that they don't really know very well. So I never, ever take that for granted. There are two things that are really sticking with me from this conversation. I think one is the purpose part. I mean, I mentioned in the beginning that they're this, power couple of purpose. I could just feel that about them. Now I know that to be true about them. They live their life with a purpose and intentionality that I think is really powerful. I think the purpose of Sophia telling the stories, for an example, that happened to her when she was a child, the losses that she experienced, while we didn't talk about physical death on this show very much, we did get into losses of childhood, being raised by young parents, having an abuse happen to you at a young age. With Derek's story of not being raised with a father, there is loss embedded in some of their earlier stories of childhood, but how they have transferred that into purpose and passion and a commitment to living a life of their own terms, I find just really important to the conversations we're going to have on this show and just personally heartwarming to me. But perhaps the biggest thing I'm sort of really still sitting with out of all the good stuff that we shared was when Derek started talking about developing your own pace in your trajectory in your life, that you can't run as fast or in the same direction all the time as other people, that developing and discovering your pace of how you're going to live your life, how you're going to do or create your career, how you're going to engage with your family and your friends. Like I've been really thinking about that because ultimately that is for me the source of what it means to live a good life, a life on your own terms, a life that you love by creation, by your design. And in order to do that, you have to think about what matters the most to you. You have to think about what you would like to sacrifice and what you would like to gain and what you would like to value and hold most dear and put that at the forefront of your life. And we all come to those decisions at very different times in our lives. There is no formula, which is, again, why I wanted to go on these journeys in these conversations, just to hear how people do it, how they get over loss and how they get over grieving and how they move past disappointments and how they create joy and happiness and a life that they love on purpose. So Derek and Sophia are beautiful role models for me with that. I'd love to know what resonated for you, what questions, what comments, what ideas you have. I'm fairly certain we'll have these folks back on the show. I mean, I just feel like there's more to be said and more to be shared. So let me know what you think at podcast@jessweiner.com. I would love to keep this kind of beautiful conversation going. And as always, thank you for going on this journey with me. See you soon. You've been listening to We're All Gonna Die Anyway with me, Jess Weiner. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can also watch this podcast by checking out my YouTube channel for filmed episodes, behind the scenes footage, and all other kinds of amazing video goodies. And of course, you can always visit me at jessweiner.com. We're All Gonna Die Anyway is exec produced by me and produced by Lauren Chavez Myers. Our episodes are recorded, filmed, and edited by Jeff Franklin and Adam Lippert of B Film. And our original amazing music is by Becca and Destiny Petrell. As always, I want to send a special thank you to the love of my life, the amor de mi vida, Felipe Lopez. And if you love this podcast, please make sure to tell your friends, subscribe, and leave a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Most importantly, if there is something that stood out to you from today's episode, I want to hear about it. So if you want to share your own story, leave a comment, ask a question, please send me an email at podcast@jessweiner.com. I can't wait to hear from you. Bye, babies.